This is an Audio Wool original.
Do we really need more female voices in representation?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Are you fucking kidding me?
I was doing a joke. Yeah, of course.
I was like, yes, we do.
Yeah, I don't know why you're yelling about it.
Because it's what I do. I yell.
We've been doing this for 10 years.
I know.
I'm
Do
not
you
gonna
like
start
how,
the podcast like that.
at
should
least,
I?
sure.
No.
I'm doing this for 10 years, Kelly. God damn it. Why are women so stupid?
I
Why
fucking
can't you
hate
figure
girls, honestly. Girls suck at podcasts.
except for Roz. Roz is pretty good.
Oh, Roz is wonderful. That was great. What a wonderful conversation you just had.
Yeah, Roz and Dan are really lovely. And I give my mom a hard time, Byron, but one of the things my mom taught me was if there's something you want to do or a person that you want to connect with, just fucking do it.
Bring them up.
And that's what I did. I reached out to them because their new podcast, What It Means to Be Human, and all of the incredible sections under that umbrella have been incredibly inspiring to me.
They being who?
Dan Zetterström and Roz Mugford are two, I would say, unique voices in the UFO space. Both of them have very deep knowledge and background in very different ways. Roz has worked in the production industry, she actually has her own production company called Double Barrel. She's done educational videos and projects with the government, Canadian government, so better government, and has also had an interest in this stuff over the years, a little bit like me, kind of just having a foot in the door. She and her husband went to a UFO conference about a decade ago that was in Canada, and she adopted that same philosophy, reached out to see if she and her husband could get press passes. They got press passes. She interviewed people like Stanton Friedman, which, by the way, you can actually watch those archived interviews. They're very rare, hard to find, and she has them available on their Patreon. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, which support us too, guys. But these two are incredible. They are, I would say, more eloquently doing what I try to do, and Byron tries to do, though he doesn't care as much about UFOs as I do. Be inclusive, be kind, be mindful.
Well, I care about that stuff.
Well, you do, just not in the UFO space as much because you're just not concerned about it. But I'm getting you there. They are really creating a pretty incredible constellation of work under What It Means to Be Human. So the primary podcast, and you can watch it on YouTube as well, is The Signal. And that is both interactions with Dan and Roz talking about some interesting things. So like, for example, they most recently had some discussions around the drone sightings in Europe over the airports over there, and also the most recent whistleblower that spoke at the most recent hearing. But then Dan also does interviews with people in this space, and they're really working to make sure that those interviews are demonstrating a much better range of representation than we frequently see in UFO world. So anthropologist Maya Cowan, they had on a couple weeks ago. I listened to that, and it was fascinating because she was talking tangentially a little bit about these. I know you hate this topic too, Byron, but the Peruvian mummies.
Well, because they're fake.
We'll talk more about this later, Byron,
sure.
But they aren't all fake.
It's all just used bones.
Byron, I really don't have the patience for that.
All
I'm
right,
going to have to wait.
That's fine.
But she raised an issue which I have not heard anybody else talk about, and that is like, hey, these were removed from the country without any concern for the indigenous populations there or discussion with. And I think these are the types of voices that are going to be providing very different perspectives on topics that at least I and a good number of our listeners, and periodically Byron, have interest in. So I really recommend you tune in because it's not going to be an echo chamber of what you hear so frequently. And I think all of us are trying to push our knowledge boundaries a little bit. And these guys are doing so in a way that is really kind and positive.
Yeah, tobehumanshow.com.
Yeah. And they also, one of the subtopics that they cover is a series called Contact, where they report, it's a little bit like True Tales of Terror, but alien / high strangeness style.
Sure, encounters.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so the first episode of that aired last week, and that is Dan sharing his own story, which is a really incredible account. And then the second part of that is going to be coming out from another UFO great mind, and that'll be coming out later on in the next couple of weeks, I believe. So all of that is to say, tune into what they're doing. Dan's roots in the UFO world are actually through that UFO podcast, which I'm sure lots of you have heard. He and Andy have been working on that for a number of years in the UK, and he's done some incredible work there, and I'm very excited to see where all of this new work leads that he's doing. Also, he likes roller coasters. Apparently, he likes to drink rosé. He has a dog. Like, these people are great humans.
Great stuff. Yeah.
And Roz, Byron, I wish you would have heard, but Roz and I had another great conversation, totally off the record, a couple days ago. We chatted for a little over an hour.
Us a pre-interview in the biz.
Well, really, I think we just couldn't wait to talk to each other because she's like a better version of me. She's like a Canadian upgrade of a Kelly. It's pretty incredible. Or maybe I'm just an American downgrade of a Roz. I guess it really depends on what way you look at it.
Man, you've got some deep questions to ask yourself.
I do. But you guys should listen. And I know we'll be talking to them again. Have a lovely time listening to Roz and Dan. And hopefully I don't get in the way too much. Byron and I have been doing this for 11 years. So there's really no good reason for me not like having all of that totally down by now. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I can blame perimenopause now. I couldn't have blamed it when we started, so I don't really know.
It's my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing to blame now.
It is a catch-all bucket for all of the things.
Yeah.
Which, maybe that's our in. Maybe that's a good in. So,
perimenopause. Love it, Dan.
Like I guess in some ways, because you guys have brought this up before, right? Like the idea that women in this space, it can be a little bit challenging, right? And so I feel like maybe as a litmus test, we just go like full steam and we just go straight to talking about perimenopause, because that's like, if we're going to catch flack for anything, that's like, you may as well just go straight to the deep end of the pool.
And I'll represent the stupid men in it. I'll be like, is menopause like, periods, but for men? Is that what we're talking about? And you guys can just be like,
there you go. We can be like, no. But really, it's funny because one of my favorite things just watching this beautiful endeavor you two have undertaken with what it means to be human, I have seen and thought about things that I really haven't pushed, at least to the surface of my consciousness for the entire time we've been doing this. And one of those is just what it means to be a woman in this space, which sounds insane that hasn't been like front of mind at some point. But I think a lot of times I just get so caught up in like bulldoze forward, do the thing that you don't really stop and pay attention to it. And it was really lovely to hear, Dan, that you were, kind of trying to give Roz a little bit of perspective on some things to expect, and that there is some pushback in this space. And kind of my North Star has always just been Linda Moulton Howe was like the woman, growing up, the only woman I ever heard talking about this stuff. And like burned into my memory is Art Bell, who I loved, by the way, but like certainly some of his things didn't age as well as others. And his like phrase with her every time was easy on the eyes. Like the intro was always what she looked like, right? Like Linda Moulton Howe, easy on the eyes, right? And like that means something so different to me now than it did obviously when I was like, 9 listening to it with my dad. And so Roz, you being in this space and, you guys having that and being conscious of that at the top, tell me what that has felt like so far, and I guess how you feel about maybe what's come before and any concerns or maybe things you're looking forward to about having that somewhat different perspective.
It's a great question. I mean, I kind of have a 2-part answer to that. I'll keep it brief though, but I've always worked in male-dominated spaces. Just working in production in general, I've always been surrounded by male camera operators, male boom operators, male grips, like sets are always a lot of men. So, and even in the agency world, like, my day-to-day work with Double Barrel, you go to conferences, marketing conferences, communications conferences, it's a lot of men, right? It's a lot of men running their own companies. So, I've been a female entrepreneur for as long as I've had a career, pretty much. So I'm used to being the odd woman out, I guess. So for me, this space, recognizing that, there's not a lot of female voices in it, was definitely something I was interested in tackling a little bit. But, it's for me, like when Dan and I first started talking, it wasn't the plan for me to be in the podcast. I was just going to produce it. And, Dan has been really the forerunner here with the show in terms of inviting me to come on and be a co-host. And then also, Dan's been really pressing to have a lot of women, come on and share their expertise, which has been so nice, because how many shows have you watched, on the subject, and it's just all men, right? So that's been super refreshing. And I think something Dan and I connected on early on, and, Dan could speak more to having women involved in the podcast for sure.
And how did that evolve? How did it go from, you two were talking to, okay, Roz, come on as the co-host? Like, how did that evolve?
So I've been kicking this show around in my head for about 2.5 years. But you know what they say about creative things? It's all about timing and the right collaborators and stuff like that. And they were just things that I couldn't get fixed in my head. I had the logo. I kind of knew roughly the North Star, but that was about it, And I did an interview that's coming out next week with Dr. Michelle Fournet, like way back when, and the show was called Outside the Lines. And I just recorded the one episode, and then just it wasn't the right time in life for it to happen. And so I carried on with my life. And, I went traveling, all these crazy synchronicities happened to me, and, all the crazy cool things like proposing to my now wife at Lou Elizondo's near right by Devil's Tower.
Oh my gosh.
And so it kind of evolved through all those times. And then Roz just shot me a message one day and was just like, hey, I do this at Double Barrel. And if you ever wanted to work together, let me know. And I said, well, actually, I do have an idea, but I kind of haven't been firing all cylinders, and it's a time issue. And we met to just talk about the show, right? And I kind of, I guess, pitched you or just told you about my idea, and just immediately you were on board with it, and throwing out ideas. And then it kind of moved from just me doing interviews with people to a channel that kind of has a number of different shows. So we have, The Signal, which is the kind of every 2-3 weeks news show, which is what Roz co-hosts with me. But then she's not co-host on Contact, which is like, experiences and interviews. And also we have a space called Outside the Lines where I'm just going to do random things as well. But Roz is very present in those things. She might not be on screen, but they would not exist without her. The first episode of Contact that came out just last week or so, Roz took my own story that we just chatted, like this, and she just edited it like crazy and made it this amazing thing that, when I listened, I almost had an out-of-body experience. I was like, I wish that this was someone else's show so I could be a fan of it, because I really enjoy,
it's okay.
what we're doing.
You can wear your own T-shirt. You are, right? So that works out. You can can be a fan. But like, how huge is that to have that experience that's obviously really personal, this level of being vulnerable enough to share it, and then trusting somebody else to edit it and like essentially package it for distribution. That's like such a cool look into you two and your work together. That's pretty amazing.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, it's collaborations, right? Roz is very used to collaborating through her production stuff. For me, going through UFO Twitter and doing, helping with the legislation, helping with, this Thomas Wright thing, it's all collaborations. That UFO podcast is collaborations. And it's that thing about, 1 + 1 = 1,000,000 when it comes to creative collaborations. And I love it because it surprises me, I'll give Roz an idea and she'll turn it around and start talking about something that I just didn't expect that angle with it at all. And so it keeps me on my toes too. And I feel like that's the importance of bringing in perspectives that aren't in this community already. When it comes to white men, I know probably a lot of people out there will bristle at me saying that.
That's all right.
It is just a fact that, you look at your YouTube stats or your podcast stats, and it's mostly, 30 plus white males listening to UFO stuff. But you do get females, but they're not really represented in the space very well. And it's the same when you start looking around the world, how well represented is Africa in the UFO space, or the Middle East, or China, or Japan, or all the conversation is about America. When people kind of say, "Oh yeah, we're going to get really out there," they tend to talk about South America, which is still the same continent, and so it was really important to me to bring these perspectives in, because when we're talking about the phenomena, I feel like we all have kind of puzzle pieces to share. And so how can we complete the puzzle if everyone isn't contributing their puzzle pieces, right? So yeah, I really wanted it to be a platform where the lesser spoken about kind of perspectives were really championed.
So refreshing. And as you guys know, and part of your MO behind the new endeavor, this space can just get really ugly and people get really catty with each other. And it really detracts from all of this cool stuff that's happening, because I feel like the speed with which information is coming out, and whistleblowers and stories that are now being acknowledged, it's kind of like a fire hose in some ways. And it can, become really negatively exhausting with all of that negative noise in the room. And then the flip side is it can be really invigorating if you can just kind of filter that stuff out, which it's been lovely to tune into what you guys are doing for those reasons. And I think, Roz, probably in some ways, your background as an entrepreneur, you've learned to do that just by nature of moving through the world, right? Like, because if you, it's one of the weird things you and I share in common. That's me too. Like in our other lives where we pay the bills, like we both own our own businesses and we've both dealt with those things. And for me, I think about it, and if I really ponder it, I'm like, yeah, there have been like some crummy encounters over the years, but it's never anything that's really taken up much space in my brain. It's like you just kind of move through it and barrel on. And I don't know if that's been your experience too, but I think that has really helped me anytime we encounter, Byron will sometimes be really sensitive about like, "Oh, Kelly, there's a comment up on YouTube that's like," I'm like, "Oh, I don't care. That's like, whatever. It doesn't bother me. It's fine." Because you just get used to it and you either choose to like give into it or use your energy and propel yourself forward. And yeah, is that kind of maybe one of the reasons you were okay jumping into this space?
Yeah, I didn't even think about it, honestly. Like when Dan offered me the chance to co-host the Signal, it was just like a no-brainer. I was like, yeah, I think this will make the show more fun. I think it'll bring in that perspective. And, so I really didn't even give it a second thought. And yeah, I think you're right. Like in female entrepreneur land, you really do get good at not listening to people who want to tell you no, or maybe tell you you're not as good, or maybe, dampen your dream for whatever that, whatever your business is or whatever you're wanting to do. So that definitely helps. I'm also a marathon runner. I've run a couple marathons in the last
That's where our
year,
paths diverge, Roz, because I can't run a mile without looking like I got hit by a semi. So that is amazing. Good for you.
So I have mental fortitude, right? So it's like
incredible.
I can push through. So, but it's all of that to say, like when we launched the podcast, there was like, no joke, like one of the first comments, Dan knows this, was like, "Oh, I really wanted to like this, but there's this woman Roz as part of it, and I really wanted to just hear Dan, and I really don't like her." And
they complained that Roz laughed, and I was like, "What?" Yeah. And they'd come from, it was an audience member from that UFO podcast. They'd come over, and I just don't get it, because, Andy and I laugh and joke all the time and we interrupt each other all the time, but there's a different standard because Roz is a woman. Yep. And I said to Roz, and Roz, very, very lovely. She cut it out of the episode because she didn't want it in there, but I pretty much said straight off the top, I was like, "Roz, laugh, hum, interrupt me, go as fast as you can."
Isn't that just, and it, in some ways to me, that's an even stronger indicator of how much this is needed, right? Because I think even that person who left that comment, right? I think that person needs this, because it is kind of a little bit unfamiliar, right? And people will struggle with what they're unfamiliar with. And I think eventually it will be more normalized. But yeah, we've got to put up with some comments. One of my earliest ones was somebody with really poor grammar posted that I was the most cringiest of any podcast host they had heard. And then like another listener that year sent me a t-shirt with like kind of like a beauty pageant ribbon printed on it that said most cringiest. I was like, that's, just as a joke. I was
serious?
like, I love, yeah. So like for every person who's going to say something bad, there's so many other lovely people out there. And even the negative voices to me are like, okay, yeah, this is why we need to do this, because it's not going to get better until people, kind of have the fortitude, like you just said, Roz.
100%. And we've just seen it with. I'm sorry, Roz. Do you want to go?
Oh! I was just going to say.
You. We're talking about the importance of women in these spaces. I'm not going first. You go first.
I stepped back. I'm taking a step back out of this conversation. I was just going to say, like, I've been a host in the past. Like, I've hosted a television show. I've done radio. So for me, like, I have an internal voice that goes, you know how to do this, you're good at this, right? But if I was new to being a host or being on camera, that kind of comment could really hurt. Like, it could be very detrimental to someone's, just a sense of being allowed to do this,
Right.
So just thinking about it from that perspective, I did comment back on it and I said something about, that's fine. Don't worry. Dan's going to be the majority host, like, cause he is, right. He'll be doing most of the episodes. I'll only be in a few, right. So it's going to be okay.
So don't tune out. It's all right.
That's right.
I promise there won't be that much joy coming from me present in all of them. Like, if you really want to avoid that, like, it's just so funny. I think people do. They've got such a specific idea of what this is supposed to be. It's similar to, the consciousness discussion. So many people are uncomfortable with that coming in. And I find this is how I try to empathize with the naysayers, right? Like, okay, that person that left that comment, clearly something felt uncomfortable to them, right? So I try to notice for myself, even in UFO world, what starts to feel uncomfortable and be like, okay, why is that feeling uncomfortable? And try to channel that, like, all right, this is probably something that I need to explore further. Just like that person really needs to listen to women laugh more, clearly. So I think that perhaps one of our superpowers then, Roz, is, the UFO space in general. If you want to make headway, you kind of have to pick and choose whose advice you listen to and have a pretty solid core compass of not worrying too much what other people think of you. We can't be thinking about UFOs too much if that's really our MO. And so hopefully that's something, people like you can bring to the forefront more as somebody who's used to kind of filtering through the noise. You can filter through the noise in the UFO world too, and be pretty authentic about the information you're putting forth and what you want to put your energy behind.
Yeah, I love that. And for the most part, like, the comments have been amazing. I just got to say, like, people have been so great. It was literally like 99% positive to 1 negative.
Love it. I love it.
Yep. For the most part, like, people are really enjoying it, which is so, so great.
That's beautiful.
Is very exciting.
We decided that's the energy that we're going to, give our energy to as well. It's really easy to kind of get bogged down in these arguments with people that are like that. But the truth is that, as you said, if someone's uncomfortable, they should challenge themselves and ask why they're uncomfortable. This subject, being in this conversation about UFOs and the paranormal, you've almost had to do that anyway with something that's kind of outside the norms. Yeah. So why is the red line, girls that you've been around for your whole life? It's so strange. And I love the fact that, you always had Scully and Mulder, but Scully, when you watch X-Files back, Scully was the one that was wrong all the time, right? And Mulder was the man and he was correct. And she was always like, she went through a stage of that show of just being like sexy agent, and Mulder didn't quite get the same treatment. But she's really turned that around, Gillian Anderson, in recent years to kind of use it to promote STEM and to say, women have a place in this conversation. But it's funny that even in that show, that was male led. You know, I know there were female writers and stuff, but ultimately Chris Carter kind of captained that ship. You're still getting that male gaze kind of pushed on to the women in the story. And yeah, I'm excited to see what, because Ryan Coogler is doing the reboot of the X-Files. So he represents much better in his projects. You know, if anyone hasn't seen Sinners, like, go see it. It's incredible.
My gosh. Amazing.
So good.
So yeah, and you know, and anyone I would say who feels uncomfortable, like you said, challenge yourself and realize that, you know, if we're going to look to the stars or something else and go, hey, come down here, you know, have a dance party with us and let's celebrate the fact that we're not alone. You should probably get used to the beings on your own planet that make up 50% of the population, if not more, before kind of dipping your toes into the otherworldly presences.
Yeah. No, I could not agree more. And to me, it's just so invigorating and fun to be in that space and feeling like that's the direction we're going. I shared with both of you when I reached out, but just watching your initial podcast of The Signal, and then certainly some of the other episodes from both The Signal and all of the adjacent shows you guys are doing, it just fills me up, because this is what propels me forward and gives me a lot of positivity to sort through all the stuff that's going on. Especially Dan, it sounds like you have newly moved to America. I'm still trying to figure out why you went that direction. If I could go the other direction, I would. So I'm like, really, you must really love that wife of yours. But as people, not just women perspectives, but also as non-American perspectives, I'm interested to hear what you both think, because I do feel like, in addition to white males taking up the space, and Dan, you hinted at this a little bit too, it's like American white males with like military mentality. I feel like if we were to really narrow it down, those are the loudest voices that I've heard in the last decade, even as there's been more coming out and plenty to get excited about. So the way I've heard you guys talk about your positions, you know, certainly as somebody from the UK and as somebody from Canada, you guys are much more pleasant in your discussions about America than I am. So I'm interested in hearing how that informs the way you guys are looking at some of this, and maybe the American elephant in the room, so to speak.
Wow. So that's a really prescient conversation, given that Donald Trump just said he was like canceling trade with Canada because the Premier of Ontario put out an ad that
there was an ad.
Ronald Reagan.
It was a mean ad. Yeah, it was so mean. It was really mean. Yeah.
I haven't even seen it. I haven't even seen it yet. But
I haven't either, but I'm sure it's wonderful. And that's, you know, you're right though. That's the level that, you know, discussion inside our country has been reduced to. So how do you guys maintain, like, okay, you guys are not America bashing. You're wonderful, and you guys are so diplomatic. I'll do the America bashing for us. But but like, how does that feel just really frustrating? How do you guys work around that in terms of, okay, how do we try to maybe overtake that singular mentality that keeps rising to the top of the conversation?
Dan, do you want to jump into that? You've been doing this a lot longer from that UK perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were doing that UFO podcast and exploring the UK space for a long time. And the US is kind of leading in the conversation around Congress and legislation and things like that. I think because, you know, the cover-up is meant to be done by the US military. I think that's why, you know, we're looking that way. And that's why a lot of these whistleblowers have this military, you know, approach. But we have spoken about, you know, on many shows, the fact that when we talk about catastrophic and non-catastrophic disclosure, all that we're saying, and, you know, this directly from Colonel Carl Nell, who set this out, is that catastrophic is basically if the US doesn't have first mover advantage. And that's a really particular perspective on the world, right? Like, America's a big superpower. They spend so much on their military, like exponentially more than the next kind of superpower. And yet so much of the conversation on what happens in the world is not dictated by the US. You know, like, I loved going traveling because I really got out of the mind space of, oh, you know, the things that I take for granted, like a Starbucks on every corner. No, you go some places and you're not getting a coffee. You know, you just have not. There's no way you can go to get it. And you've just got to enjoy, you know, what you have. And it really kind of shifts your mindset. And so as I've kind of been exploring the world, I've kind of bumped into people who have these different approaches to the subject, and they're tantalizing and just as valid as the perspectives coming out of the US military, if not more, because the indigenous peoples in Colombia, the Muisca tribes, they spoke about UFOs, talking about them as ancestor lights. And so, for anyone who follows, say, Whitley Strieber, where his own personal story has gone from aliens took me to something much more connected with the afterlife, that ancestor light idea rings a bit more true. Like, are they just souls without a body? Is that what they look like? And you kind of have these flowing orbs. Chris Bledsoe has kind of started plugging into the same thing, and I think it's a very kind of profound and deeply touching thing to see people not necessarily, worship is the wrong word, but just have such high regard for these objects that appear instead of just treating them like a plane, and it's weird because we also say she about boats and planes and stuff like that, right? So we don't see them as imbued with character or anything like that, but those perspectives hit me deeper, and I think they get at a truth in this subject where all of this phenomena kind of overlaps, and it all kind of comes from this ethereal space beyond, and we're trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes, if, a stringboard analogy, America's like this piece on the stringboard, and it's really hard for some of us to back up and see the full perspective of all of these other cool things that are going on. And, even James Fox, I had the opportunity to speak with him when we were at Contact in the Desert, and just hearing about, everybody knows he's done this amazing work in Brazil, but it's been like more than a decade that he's continued to go back and forth and really earn the trust and respect of a lot of the people involved in this story. And I think that level of engagement outside of our kind of singular default focus in America is so important. And I think really contributes to how much this space is growing in terms of perspective and knowledge. And I think, anybody who hasn't, please go and listen to the first episode of Contact from you guys, because the story of yours, Dan, is just so compelling. And hearing it did not happen in America, it didn't even happen in the UK, and listening to that and what that did to you. Not everybody has had such an experience, but I think hearing those firsthand accounts, maybe this is women's intuition. I don't know, Roz, but I feel like my gut tells me pretty quickly when I'm listening to somebody, especially when I'm talking to them, even by video, like I get a pretty strong gut feeling for like either these people are full of it or this is their truth. Like, who knows if that was the reality that appeared to everybody else, but like knowing that difference. And Dan, your story is just incredible and compelling because it feels so authentic.
That's really cool of you to say. Thank you. And you hit on something so important there. I think intuition is, for me, if we're talking about UFOs, consciousness, mediumship, whatever, I think intuition is the thing that leads us by the nose towards these almost supernatural spaces. And I've definitely touched on it on the show, but I'll say it again. John Keel thought the phenomena was like tempting us forward with lessons, and that once we become accustomed to kind of one form of it, it would go, okay, I'm going to change now. And this is kind of closer to what I'll eventually be, but it's still not the real thing. And it's kind of winning, hearts and minds. And it's getting people to, I always wonder, if you were to land on a planet and everyone could see you, it would be chaos. Whereas if you picked people who were kind of intuitively intelligent and had emotional intelligence, they wouldn't freak out. Like there are stories of aliens landing and giving people pancakes, and they, the witness gives them water and things like that. And I'm like, that's what needs to be our first step into interacting. Not talking about what laser weapons can you give us and stuff like that. It's just the basics. Here's water, here's supplies. We are good to you, and you can be good to us, and that's where we start.
Right. And Roz, you've mentioned that you perhaps haven't had any, or at least didn't mention any UFO experiences necessarily, but more maybe consciousness, psychic-based experiences. I don't want to steal them because I'm sure they're being saved for an episode with you guys, but is there anything you can touch on there about how that resonates with you, this idea of intuition and how that has informed some of those experiences.
Gosh, I mean, I think you're totally right, Kelly, in that, when I'm listening to somebody tell me a story, I also have this spidey sense or intuition of, am I feeling that this is heartfelt? Or am I feeling this is more cerebral and is maybe coming from a different place, And that was always like prior to working with Dan, I shot a small series, and we interviewed Stanton Friedman and we interviewed Travis Walton. And, my idea for that was, let's just let these people sit down in front of a camera and talk to the audience like you would talk to them. Let's let people get a feeling for how authentic these people are, right? Because when it's all soundbitey and we're clipping people up and we're putting them into a documentary, you don't really get a feeling or a felt sense of what it is like to sit in that room. So I really wanted to do that with those interviews, just let these people's hearts shine, right? Like really let them speak to their experience and let the audience feel that, because I agree, like, I'm definitely led by intuition when it comes to interviews, and it's such a dance always as well, when you're talking to somebody in terms of like, where do we go with this and how are they feeling about that, and should I skate over here or should we move over here, and there's all of that always happening very subtly. But yeah, that's definitely how I approach interviews, is very intuitively, and hopefully the audience feels that with the content, right? They get a chance to really feel what people are saying. Like Dan's contact story is a great example, because, and even editing that for me was like such a joy, because, he's really coming from the heart and telling his story. And it's just such a beautiful thing to edit when you've got somebody being so authentic. And it's my happy place for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that authenticity, it's interesting because some of the stories that have come out recently, some of the really high profile stories, I get pretty strong feelings from, and I could be totally wrong, right? But so far it's panned out pretty positively. And one of the themes that I keep hearing, both in conversations I'm seeing, interviews on TV, but also interviews that I'm engaged in, is this repeated discussion of feminine energy and the divine feminine. And it's funny because that used to be a phrase that I'd be like, oh my God, that's like way too woo-woo for me, right? I have a sister who, like Roz, is a yoga teacher and very spiritual. And she does, like a monthly women's group and getting together and discussing the divine feminine. And this is one of those like gut checks I've had to have, like, okay, I probably need to lean more into it because I feel so like negatively responsive to it. But it's ironically helped because I keep hearing it in the UFO space. And two really interesting conversations. One was hearing the most recent, I guess, the biggest military whistleblower from last year, who came out and was discussing flying over this craft. As he was coming closer to it, he felt like it was this incredible female energy, this feminine energy. And he was speaking over and over and over about that female energy. And I think all of us have probably heard Jake Barber's interview at this point. Those of you who haven't, I really encourage you to go listen to the long form of it rather than the short form that appeared on News Nation, because the short form I really was ready to write off. And the long form to me felt much more authentic. It felt like that, that hearing his heart, it spoke more to me, as to your point, Roz. But it struck me that, all of us have masculine and feminine energy in us, but that as somebody who's so ingrained in the military, that feminine energy is probably more of a departure from his norm, right? Whereas another gentleman I spoke to, I don't know if you guys are familiar, there's this guy who investigates Bradshaw Ranch down in Arizona. He goes by the name Hoodoo Tall. His real name is Jürgen Hess. Just wonderful, lovely man. Somebody who, if you met, I'm sure you would say, like, is probably more in touch with his feminine side. He's, plenty masculine, but not a military vibe to him whatsoever. He described a very similar encounter, and all of this loving, pure energy was part of the dialogue, but the word feminine didn't pop up And I felt like it was because it didn't feel like such a departure for him. Like it was much more, this was in line with kind of the way he operates through life versus being, in boot camp and training and military spaces for so long. It probably pulls you a little bit more away from that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but those two discussions really struck me because they sounded like they were describing exactly the same thing. And one of them was speaking as though it was this huge difference from what they normally experience. And the other one was speaking about it as more pure, but not nearly as different in terms of female male energy. Have you guys in your conversations, have you encountered anybody discussing those things as well? I don't want you to give anything away for interviews you guys haven't aired yet, but anything that's popped up for either of you.
In terms of the interviews, not yet, except for when we get to Sarah Gam from the UAP task force. We had a long-ranging conversation, and for the first half, I tried to keep it to a work in the task force, and then the second half, the gloves came off, and we got crazy about mediumship and energies and things like that. And it was my favorite half of the interview because,
that's awesome.
It's not often you get to talk to someone who studied UFOs for the government, but is also really into mediumship and nature, and I feel like all of our interests overlap there. And yes, Sarah's kind of been nudging me in a direction, and a number of people over the years have, but Sarah's the first from, this kind of show. And I've kind of gone down the path of, hearing about feminine energy and instantly kind of being like, ew, girly energy, and
right.
Then eventually getting over the cooties and going, oh, I see. It's just a way of talking about opposite energies.
Right.
Not necessarily girl and boy, it's just feminine and masculine. They're just labels. Don't worry about it,
Right.
And then going from that to finding out about the lady and these Marian apparitions that happen across the world and are, confirmed by the Catholic Church. If anyone doesn't know about that, by the way, I highly recommend go out of your way to read what's called the Nag Hammadi texts, and they inform you about what people refer to as Gnosticism, which isn't a thing unto itself. There are lots of different books like the Dead Sea Scrolls and things like that that kind of go against mainstream Catholicism, and Gnosticism just means other, and so this is where we get the ideas of, if people have heard of like archons and spirits attaching to us and influencing us badly, and that there being essentially like an arm wrestle over the universe between a fallen angel and the creator, which some of you might go, oh, that sounds Catholic, but other people are going to recognize that, this is just the story of Lord of the Rings. Just
bigger archetypes.
Bigger archetypes, and there are rules for how these beings interact with us. There can't be any direct interaction from what are called angels. They can't do things, but they can tell humans to do things and influence them. And then when I went traveling, I was in Mexico right for the festival of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which was a Marian apparition from the 1500s. And it was incredible. I went out of my way to be like, you know what? This is going to be a challenge for me, because I grew up in a Catholic school. I was never baptized. The priest in my school did some very bad things with children. And so, I grew up with, screw the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff is a challenge for me. But I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to go because I want to see what this single appearance all these hundreds of years ago inspired in people and how it changed the world. And I saw people who had, they're carrying these big pictures of the Marian apparition. And one lady walked with her family from their village for a week. They would just sleep on the side of the road, get up and walk. And she crawled carrying this painting. That was her level of dedication. It took me like 4 hours to walk up the hill, and I was exhausted. I can't even imagine a week. But that level of devotion being inspired because of this appearance is just something to behold, and everyone there was so happy, and it was a celebration of love and caring for each other. And I had some really wonderful conversations with just strangers in the moment that I didn't get their names. We just passed like ships in the night. And it struck me that, we see these things as religion. And with the word religion kind of comes a whole bunch of, suggested things like the Crusades. It's a very loaded kind of word. More people have been killed in the name of God than anyone else, they say. And so, but if you separate it from that and you kind of go, okay, if something's coming here and it's trying to influence us and giving people little nudges across eras, and this is what resulted from one tiny nudge of a boy that thought he saw a woman that told him, like, hey, I'm Mother Mary and you need to go tell people that you saw me. Like, that has inspired so many good changes to people's lives that it's hard not to understand this whole phenomena, be it, the religious label or the esoteric or supernatural label, as something that is promoting loving energy, and that's, a more feminine energy. And so that challenge has really kind of dragged me through the bushes, to come out with twigs kind of sticking out of my hair and stuff, but so satisfied from the adventure and so nourished from the wisdom that I gained doing that it really affected how I look at the world. I don't look at religion and go, oh, that's wrong, there's no God anymore. I look at religion and I go, wow, what an incredible thing this story has inspired in someone, that they go out of their way to do good deeds all day, every day.
Yeah. The lens of it is really fascinating. And again, I think stepping outside of at least my country's borders to see some of those different perspectives is really helpful. I did an investigation, on our podcast, we do random horror stories or cryptid stories or conspiracies in addition to all the UFO stuff. And 4 or 5 years ago, I really dove into the Miracle at Fatima. And I grew up thinking that was total baloney. Like, also I was never baptized. I'm bound for hell. Like, I really, I have.
They have all the best people and the best music.
That's what I hear. I mean, honestly, in my experience, I can't imagine another place to be. So, but I always have had a very negative gut reaction to religion, as you described, Dan. Though I don't have nearly the visceral experience that you do. But when I went into researching it, I had already written it off as total baloney. By the time I finished, I called one of my friends who I grew up with, childhood friend who was very, very Catholic, and said, okay, this is so true. Something happened here. Like, I don't know what it was, but I feel there's absolutely something to that. And again, it's kind of what you spoke to, Dan, that clearly something happened that inspired such a huge shift in behavior for people. And it's good to remember that can be a positive shift. It doesn't always have to be a reason to turn on your neighbor. There are plenty of instances throughout history where it has been a motivation to be a better version of ourselves. And that's something that I think we can all pay a little more attention to.
Yeah, you put that really well there, Kelly. An invite to be a better version of ourselves. And what more perfect thing could a being not from Earth want us to be doing, right?
Exactly.
There is an argument to be made of like, okay, if I make them disarm in peace and love, then it's an easy kind of invasion. But it doesn't feel like it's necessarily going that way. Fatima is amazing because it's one of these things that, there are so many small, strange details, like how it rained, and then in the photographs, everyone's clothes are dry, but everyone says that it rained, no one argues over that. There are two suns in these photographs that you can see, and there's never been like, a proper detail they meant shared, but the journey that those 3 children went on that, met the lady in that instance, and especially her name's Sister Lucia.
I think that is right. Yeah.
How she was like whisked away to a monastery and kept under lock and key. And, there's a biography you can go and read, but there's an argument out there that it's not even written by her and that it's written by the church to kind of promote a certain image. Yeah. And again, you're seeing that kind of negative kind of, I need to control the narrative creep into something that was really pure. And seeing the photographs of all those people looking up at the sky and not really having a detailed photograph of what's in the sky just kind of begs the question of, is this a consciousness experience? And I don't mean people imagine it in their heads. I mean, they're literally having an experience in their bodies that the person next to them maybe can't experience for whatever reason. And that to me is so intriguing. Gary Nolan talks about in our heads, the default mode network, and how it kind of, it operates our breathing and our legs moving and, all the things that we need kind of done on a daily basis to survive. Yet people who are neurospicy, and I expect all 3 of us are, we're all creative, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
right. That all the time.
Yep. Right. And apparently we're more inclined to see this stuff. because we're more open as people, not to just other ideas, but also to things outside of our perspective. So we'll look at the strange figure that appears instead of kind of going, oh, I don't like the look of that, and moving away, and thinking it was a shadow in the corner of the room. So again, if I was the visitors, I would aim for us.
Totally.
And we're, the intuitive people, so we're a little bit more empathetic and things like that. And so a lot of this kind of fits together puzzle wise,
Roz, you and I talked the other day a little bit about this idea that maybe none of this is woo. It's just science we don't understand. And this is certainly one of those areas where I feel really inclined to believe that. The idea that I'm sure our brains are picking up on patterns that we are not consciously aware of at any level. And so it could be like when we have intuition about something, it could be just this insane number of details that our brains are subconsciously pulling in. It's not necessarily woo, right? And my husband and I discuss this a lot. He's come a long way, bless his heart. But when we started this endeavor together a long time ago, he was very open to talking about a lot of these things, but really thinking 12 years, I've convinced him of Roswell and the JFK assassination not being what the surface story is. I don't think I've really sold him on anything. Very proud of that.
They're good main ones, though.
They are good. They're great gateway drugs,
Yeah.
So,
right.
But the more he and I have these long conversations, the more we kind of are finding a way to meet in the middle, where he's coming from just such a almost religious allegiance to science, and I'm coming from this like, I'm open to whatever, who knows what it is. And I think you can find those places where it really can come down. Gary Nolan, you mentioned, I think is a wonderful person to listen to because he's so scientific, and you can hear how really you push hard enough with the science and you really start getting into a lot of these. And everybody talks about quantum physics, of course, but in a lot of these consciousness ways that feels to be the case. And Roz, I guess thinking about your entry into this years ago. So I know, as you said, you guys have these really cool interviews that are, I think, available to Patreon patrons, that are archive videos of you kind of in maybe your earliest entry into this field. And getting to talk to Stanton Friedman, I'm going to be jealous of until the day I die. But if you think about what pushed you into this to begin with, was there just this overarching maybe pattern recognition you had that felt like this was something you wanted to follow, or was there a catalyst, or can you point to anything?
Yeah, when I was a kid, my stepdad was really a big believer in ESP. And so we used to sit together and he would hold cards in his hand. And the cards would face him, and then we would hold hands. And he would be like, now run your finger across the top of the cards, and I'm going to think of what card I want you to pick. And he wouldn't look at the card, so I couldn't tell. And so I would hold his hand. I'd be like 8 years old. So I'd run my finger across the top. And like probably 8 times out of 10, I'd pull the right card every time. Like every time.
Oh my gosh.
It was really wild. And so he was really into this idea of like, consciousness and like psychic ability. And so there was always books around our house from the time I was a kid, like Mysteries of the Unexplained, you guys. I don't know, but like that's basically my Bible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally. Yep. We actually just got the vintage set of it. We actually just found at some thrift store, and I've got it on our shelf now. So I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I just read that thing cover to cover so many times that like it was worn, and it was all the stories like Loch Ness Monster, angel hair falling from the sky, spontaneous human combustion, UFOs, Bigfoot. I mean, you name it. It was like everything. Right. So yeah, that was my earliest entry into, paranormal phenomenon. Also, I just was a huge Nancy Drew fan. So any idea of
Roz,
like a mystery,
we're the same person. I think,
that needed to be uncovered.
You're an upgrade because you're Canadian, but we're the same person otherwise.
Oh my
and
gosh.
her friends like Bess and George, which was the coolest because it had a boy name for a girl character.
It was incredible.
So cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've always just been curious. And so I think, yeah, those early experiences with my stepdad for sure kind of catapulted me down the road. And that's the beginning of the story that I will eventually tell on,
Oh my gosh, I love it. Ooh, what a great teaser.
That's a good to be continued
on our show.
Yeah. So were you raised religious or not?
No, not at all.
Interesting. Yeah, I just gathering data points in my head of like, common threads. Okay, what are it's never 100% of the time, but I do think for me, I've found myself, in the hardest parts of my life, leaning more into this. Like when I go through some really rough patch, I'm like, I need to like dig into the best UFO videos and books. And like, that's where I look for solace, I guess. So I guess that's like my replacement for religion. I don't know if your experience has been like that at all.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wasn't into any form of religion at all until when my mom passed away, essentially.
Oh.
And at that time, I really felt like, oh, I need something under my feet here. I don't have enough spirituality in my life. And so that was like a hard shift for me, not going down the UFO road. But the interesting thing is so I really fell into Buddhism, and I'm not a Buddhist, but I really fell into it. And I was doing a lot of meditation at a Buddhist center with monks, and prior to my yoga training. But that was where I discovered meditation and this idea of consciousness and quieting your mind and finding that calm, quiet place within you and connecting, to whatever we want to imagine that to be, whether it's the universe or God or, your consciousness or your own internal self, whatever you want to think that is. Right. So, yeah. So finding Buddhism actually led me to consciousness. And then, with my interest in UFOs, it just all started. It's like the Dalai Lama, right? The Dalai Lama is huge into physics. He believes that
totally.
That Buddhism and physics should support each other. And he's really up on, all the theories. And so, yeah. So when I started to discover that, I was like, oh, this all overlaps. This is so fascinating,
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah,
wow.
it's exciting.
So
it's exciting.
That is really, and it's funny, the Buddhism piece. There's a Tibetan Buddhist group locally here who, when you translate their name from Tibetan, it means sky metal. And they're like in my little hometown. I actually worked with them for a while, like in a nonprofit capacity, but I was fascinated, and every chance I got, they had actual Tibetan monks that would come over, and anytime I got a chance to chat with them, that was always the thing I wanted to talk about. And it always struck me because they just talk about it as though a given. Well, yes, of course, like there are things that are visiting, and this is, it's like, why wouldn't there be? Why is this even a conversation of, with questions? Because the answer is yes, obviously. Yeah, it's so all of us, it sounds like, interesting outside of maybe our default cultural framework, have encountered some cool things that have bent our ear in this direction even further. Wow.
Love it.
So, and Dan, since you're here, I want to pick your brain too. What got you started, like at the very, very beginning? What was your entry?
I was initiated, I would say, by Mulder and Scully. Finding it was the very first episode of season 2, when Mulder goes to Puerto Rico and sees that massive telescope, and
may it rest in peace.
Yes.
Breaks my heart.
And yeah, that was the episode that just hooked me. And I'd had experiences before then that I talked to my sister about because we were in the same house, and we think that the house was haunted, and we both had just really strange experiences there. So it kind of reared its head for us, and then it kind of gave me a hook to be curious and see the wonder in it. And then I went away from all of this, and I eventually, I was very like physics, chemistry, maths. That's what I was studying. That's what kind of I was good at. And then I found the music of Blink-182 and Tom DeLonge. And so I picked up the guitar, and that completely changed me into being like, I'm not doing my homework, Mom. I was as a punk teenager. But then Tom came barreling into the UFO thing, and I got dragged there with him as well. And it was a really cool, way that it kind of all came around and connected. Especially now to all these years later, this t-shirt that Tom bought off me and sells on his website and has become such a big thing for the band. It's really cool to, feed back into that creative Ouroboros. He might not know who I am, but I've managed to impact the band that impacted me so much just from following what I'm passionate about and what, really kind of sets my soul on fire. And I think there's something in that, the people that seem to excel in this subject are the ones that really kind of go for it with experience in these things instead of just talking about them. Because it's just an incredible teacher, right? And you guys were talking about, science versus faith and the woo. And over the years, there's so much that I've learned that I thought was woo, but is actually science. And I don't mean, stuff that, is just esoteric and really out there. I'm talking about, peer-reviewed physics papers, and the effects that kind of go on in the universe, even just thinking of the universe in terms of probabilities and not space-time, because that's gone away about 100 years ago, where, quantum probabilities now, you can get quite deep into it philosophically, thinking, my laptop is currently on a table. Why isn't it falling through the table? Because that's the least possible thing in this realm. Okay, well, is there another realm where that's more possible that happens? Oh, wait, there are these creatures that go through walls. Could they just be using that principle to kind of go through things, And it kind of, it dares you to kind of try and rationalize these kind of woo things. And now, I practice remote viewing. I do meditation, and I try and lean into that space because, all these mediums talk about, I love it, aliens exist.
Byron's getting out his old blink. He's a blink fan,
and I remember that
so he's
t-shirt
like,
as well.
ask him what his favorite album is.
It's an old school one. It's got to be Enema of the State because, that's the classic. Yeah, and when I got to visit Roswell, we rolled into town with Aliens Exist blaring out of the car, because you have to. So I kind of do these practices now, and I'm much more kind of open to people like mediums. I went to see a medium who told me that I should be doing what he's doing, but he told me, do not follow any set path. If someone's like, I can teach you how to be psychic, don't go to that.
Just go with your gut.
Take things that work with you and work with your intuition and collect bits from different places and it'll work for you. And I went out and I got myself a Muse headband that it just measures your brain waves as you meditate.
Yeah.
And
so cool.
The idea is that it plays a track of like, the ocean, but you can make the ocean calm if you meditate well. And when the ocean calms, you hear birds tweeting. So your job is to get it calm, and you get better at that as you kind of practice it. And now I'm to a point where if someone told me this 5 years ago, I would have gone, that's too woo and that's not science and I don't believe you. But I'm legitimately at a point now where I can say, okay, I'm going to amplify my alpha waves in my brain and I'm going to drop the gamma and delta and all these other waves. And I can see it, on this headset. I can see it tracking. And when you kind of spike the alpha waves is meant to be where, mediumship, remote viewing, all these kind of strange things are. And so I'm trying to learn and be open, but I'm doing it in a scientific way so I can show other people. So science and faith, I think they go together really well. And I think it's kind of that, there's something in our gut that says science and faith can't go together. But, Einstein would refer to God, and Carl Sagan would, just look at Contact, the book that he ended up writing, out there in terms of how he deals with consciousness and the afterlife and how things project to us and mysteries of the universe. Even the scientists are dripping with woo.
Yep. Which is, somebody just needs to, Neil deGrasse Tyson is always the subject of my frustration. I'm always whining to my husband and Byron about, like, it's just like he's so opposed to anything being outside of exactly what he knows. Maybe somebody needs to get him one of those headbands. It sounds like maybe that would help.
Yeah, for sure. and he slips into it sometimes, right? Like there was a great interview he did. I think it was on Joe Rogan, and he wasn't asked, are aliens real? He got asked a question about what if they're real? What would it look like if they encountered us? And he said, well, we can't say that they're going to look like us. For all we know, they're tree people and they come here and they see us burning down the Amazon. And they're disgusted with us and we're committing genocide against their species and we start a war. And then he like stopped that and he went back to kind of, doing safe science talk.
Right, but
I was like,
that's crazy.
what we want from you, Neil.
Right.
That kind of speculation of what if, just opening your mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's just instructive.
Yeah. Well, and as one of my favorite developments recently is both with Galileo Project and the Soul Foundation, what are considered mainstream serious academics, right? Probably my favorite interview I've ever done was, he actually just passed away this fall, but Jeff Meldrum, who was a Bigfoot researcher, and he was like a tenured professor, and was studying like the evolutionary gait of mankind. And in doing that, started getting, people would send these footprint casts of Bigfoot to him. And he wrote this incredible book on it. But he was like the one touchstone of like, okay, academia is willing to talk about it in this place. And he didn't lose his tenure. They didn't try and kick him out. And I feel like now, well, yeah, Byron's joking. They killed him. No, they didn't kill him. The poor guy passed away from cancer this fall. It was actually
that's sad.
Yeah, I got a couple texts on the day it happened because I didn't realize that he had been ill. But I do think that there have been a few of those pioneers over the years, John Mack, certainly at Harvard. And now it feels like there's more force behind it. The conference that's actually happening as we speak over in Milan, of all of these PhD professors and academics. And in fact, some might even say that they're pretty careful about who they let into their inner circle. And if you don't have those academic credentials, it's really hard to find your way in there, which is a little bit frustrating. But at the same time, I'm glad those conversations are happening so that hopefully the momentum is behind more of academia, at least, as you said, Dan, opening your mind to it and considering the possibilities. Nobody's saying that it has to be the conclusion. Just test some hypotheses,
Yeah, just get out there. Richard Feynman, the nuclear physicist, said that all scientists should approach any problem with the curiosity of a child. And I think that is perfect. You should be curious about the world. Don't try and impose what you believe onto it. Just listen to what is there.
And full circle, Roz, I feel like, in at least the stereotypical manner, hopefully that's what women like you and I can offer, right? Because the whole, whether it's military or Neil deGrasse Tyson, or, there seems to be a lot of fear surrounding outside those hard barriers of exactly what we know to be true and what we don't. And I feel like, women perhaps, or at least the female energy in all of us feels a little bit more comfortable dancing on those edges. And I'm so excited to hear where you guys lead with all of this. And Roz, I will be waiting. I don't know how long before you guys post the rest of your story for Contact, but now it's like the worst cliffhanger ever because I'm going to be wondering what the heck the rest of that story is until you guys get it up there. So hopefully it won't be too far out in the future. I know you guys said that Vinny's is the next one, right? The kind of the part two of your story, right, Dan?
Yeah, that's right. So Vinny will be talking about his experience in Colombia, filming the lights, seeing the lights and things like that. If you want to hear my story kind of more fully, I did do an interview with a show called Hey, That's Weird, where they just, it really was weird just talking about yourself for an hour. But they were great and they put a really good episode together. And not to mention, there was a really weird synchronicity in it where I told the host that the number 33 follows me everywhere. And that when I tell people this, it goes to them and it starts following them. And he was like, oh yeah, that's crazy. And that's how it was. Then he put the episode up and the episode was exactly 33 minutes long. And I messaged him and I said, did you do that on purpose? And he said no. And he has been texting me since we did that interview going, what? How did that happen?
What did you give me?
Yeah. I'm like, that's the hitchhiker effect. It's not all bad, you know?
It sounds way less scary.
A little sign to say, like, look, there's mystery in the universe. Keep digging,
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Oh my gosh. Well, now I guess Byron, you'll have to wonder. Does it keep your eyes peeled for 33? Maybe 30. I mean, it could follow me too, but it can follow me. That's great. Byron's the one we need to convince. He's the skeptic. So.
Yeah. Well, I'll try and keep him in mind for the experience to go to him because
I love
it's
it.
The skeptics that need these experiences,
It
right?
is.
We're preaching to the choir for us.
It is. It absolutely is. Well, before we wrap up, I know, Dan, you've got a hungry puppy dog, and the last thing I want to be responsible for is a dog going hungry. So, is there anything specific you want to make sure our, awesome audience knows? We've got an incredible, I really do think that our community is like custom designed for listening to you guys because it is such a common space of inclusion and positivity. So anything specific that you want to make sure that they're aware of?
Go ahead, Roz.
That's your. I'm like waiting for you to launch into your extra. How every episode. If you want us to, support us on Patreon, you've got the perfect extra. I mean, this is your moment.
I don't have it like learned off by heart yet. But I would just tell people, be inclusive. Listen to the voices that you find challenging to listen to. That's how we reach across the aisle and we make a better world and lead with empathy instead of greed and ego. And that stuff will lead us to the answers for all of the mysteries in the universe as well. We can go and explore outer space while we're exploring inner space. And I think those two mysteries are linked tangibly, especially when you look at the, quantum stuffs and entanglement there. So, yeah, I would just say to people, be open-minded, not so open-minded that your brain falls out, but
of course,
follow the data, follow your intuition, and just the bottom line, the whole, female representation in the space. If you watch any horror movie, I watched one last night, and this held true as well. When the male characters don't listen to the women, they die. Every single time they die.
No, it's true.
If they listened to the women, they would have got out of there alive. So just hold more space for the women in your life, guys.
So funny you mentioned
Jamie Lee
that.
Curtis.
Yes. So Dan, it's funny you mentioned that. I don't know if you know this, but the other part of our podcast is horror movies. And I actually gave a talk a few years ago for just a small university thing about women in horror movies and actually kind of the feminist power behind it in general. Certainly there are exceptions to the rule.
Wow.
But final girls are a thing. You never hear the phrase final guys. It's final girls, right?
Absolutely.
And I do think that there's a lot to that. So I love that you mentioned that. And Roz, I certainly I feel like we really do have 1,000 hours of conversation, but is there, I know you guys do, one of the things that I've heard you guys mention is your book club. I would love to hear, recommendations for our listeners of, if you're going to buy some books to hunker down with this winter, what are some top of the list ones that you think would be really important for people to be reading right now?
Oh gosh, there are so many, but the one we recommended for this, our first book club, is by Ardy Sixkiller Clark. And it's called, I believe it's called, I'm just blanking on the name right off the top of my head. I want to say like Experiences with Star People. Is it Experiences with Star People?
I think Encounters with Star People.
Encounters with Star People. So the challenge with it, we recommended it. And then I realized, her first book is out of print. So I think we're going to have to read more Encounters with Star People, which is her second book. So she's an indigenous author and academic who actually went into communities and got firsthand accounts and stories from people of their encounters with star people, as they call UFOs or UAP, right? And her books have been recommended twice. Richard Haddam recommended it when he had him on, and then Maya Cowan, who's a PhD candidate, synchronously also her father is the principal of my old high school in BC, which is so wild.
Okay, that's crazy.
We grew up like an hour away from each other. It's crazy. Anyway, she recommended it also on the last episode. So yeah, I would say Ardy Sixkiller Clark and Encounters with Star People, and more Encounters with Star People are the first two we're starting with. So yeah, dig into those ones.
Byron just pulled them up on the screen for me. He's going to order them right now. Just to whet
people's appetites. Some of the chapters for Encounters with Star People. First chapter is Missing Time. There's encounters that predate Roswell. There's one called The Man Who Shot an Alien. Another one called They Are Among Us. Another one called They Hover Over Missile Silos. And so like all of this stuff is just built in so that we assume people know this stuff now, but they don't. This was kind of unknown. So Arty was writing about this back when these things weren't so well known. And there is also chapter 21 is just called Two Women Speak Their Minds.
Oh
So
my gosh, I
that's,
love that.
That's beautiful.
That's where I'm starting. I'm starting at that chapter.
Chapter 21, yeah.
Well, and
Is
even
it a
if
picture of Kelly and I?
there you go. But like, even if it's stuff we've heard of, I am so excited to hear it from that different perspective. Because as you said, there's so much wisdom to be gained from the way that other people look at these things. And certainly, it has played out time and time again that the indigenous people of our areas have a whole lot of wisdom that we would all be wise to listen to. So that would be, I'm very excited. This sounds like a perfect project for my winter.
Yeah, and coolest name ever also, right?
Yes.
Ardy Sixkiller Clark. Like, how badass is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, you guys, thank you so much. I really wish that we could talk forever, and hopefully Roz and Dan. I know, Dan, you've got tons of stuff. Feel like I'm bugging Roz because I know she's not doing quite as many episodes with you, but I would love to get together and talk again. I want to pick your brain about
let's.
I think that you guys talked about it on your most recent episode, but Roz, I feel like there's so much to mine from you, even about the drone technology and your understanding of it from, again, the other set of hats that you wear, and how that gives you some really interesting insight into what's going on, whether it's, in Europe or in New Jersey. There's a ton to talk about there too that I'd love to hear.
Totally. And I'm a huge horror movie fan. So,
oh my gosh,
and Stephen King reader. We can go deep.
We could go forever. Okay, well, the next time we go to a horror movie conference, we'll drag you to that too then. Because those are the best one we've been to was at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. And we went there for a horror movie festival. And it was like
so cool.
I'll have to send you guys some photos. I am an insanely questionable mother. I brought my 6-month-old daughter. And my sister came along and babysat, but we carted her around, and they had cardboard cutouts of the little girls from The Shining, and I put my poor 6-month-old daughter's face in one and mine in another. And
this is how babies get possessed, Kelly.
It very well could be, honestly. They'll know what to do with it though, because they've heard so much about possessions and aliens and Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster that they're going to be really well versed. As long as it doesn't have anything to do with religion, they'll be fine. If it turns out that the Bible's on point, they're really doomed because they don't know a darn thing about that. But yeah, that's so fun that you guys like horror movies too. Dan, you got to tell me, what one did you watch last night?
I watched Weapons.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So good.
Yeah.
I'm so, what did you think?
I loved it. Absolutely adored it. I love the way the story was told, like the way it was chopped up from different perspectives. And there was so much in it that was just so creepy. And it managed to like perfectly balance the comedy and the horror as well.
100%.
And there's a few scenes in that are going to stick with me for a very long time, I think.
Yep. Well, it's funny. We recorded an episode about it just, I don't know, Byron, what was that, 3 or 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago? We did an episode on Weapons right when it came out. We kind of toggle back and forth week to week, and that was a horror week. So it was a really good one.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we'll have to have you guys on to talk about a horror movie at some point.
Yeah, we should.
Anytime.
Yeah, let's do it.
Anytime.
We ripped the Band-Aid off now, so let's make sure we
totally
we'll see each other often.
I agree.
And
And
have a good vibe.
Dan, I have to tell you, the Tom DeLonge thing, I was like the latest person to the party. I held off for so long with my biases about like, there is no way the dude who puts a sock on his penis on stage knows a lot about UFOs. There's just no way. And finally, actually, it was listening to Klaus and Garrett. I finally was like, okay, these guys are awesome. They keep talking about him. I need to just do it. And we listened to on a road trip, my husband and I listened to Secret Machines. I was like, oh my God, so good. It's incredible.
His new book just came out. I don't know
that's what I heard. Have you read it yet?
Time Rider. So I'm about 9 chapters in.
How is it?
And it's very interesting. Because it's all based on, if you've read God's Man and War, because you have Secret Machines, the fiction ones, and then you have like the non-fiction,
the
really
Lavenda
dry,
ones,
kind of studious ones,
which I love.
A lot of what is talked about in war, like the weird coincidences around JFK, and going all the way back to the 9, and Andrei Puharich kind of doing that. This is all part of this new book. So essentially, they've taken all of this factual stuff and these weird synchronicities throughout history, and they're applying like a time travel story to them. But it's from the perspective of the time traveler coming back to our time to affect the time stream. So it's a really cool story.
Wow.
It's got a little Terminator, a little Fringe, little bits of different things, but it just hits the ground running and goes.
And it was AJ Hartley too, right? That was
yes. So AJ's writing it, and so it feels like all of them smushed together finally into a book instead of these separate series.
Oh, that's phenomenal. There's we actually have house guests for the weekend. One of the guys that's in the Galileo project, Mitch Randall. I don't know if you guys
cool. Yes.
But yeah, so he's the other sky watcher, right? Like he's trying to do the radar, kind of crowdsourced radar UFO detection. He and his wife are coming to visit for the weekend. So maybe we'll have to go to the bookstore and grab copies for everybody. Sounds like a great one. Yeah. Okay. Well, you guys, thank you so much. It was really lovely to chat, and I promise to have a more, a less meandering conversation next time. I just had so many things I wanted to touch on with you guys to hear about.
No, thank you so much for having us. And this is mine and Roz's first interview together. So this is like a big moment for us too. So that's really cool.
Nice work, you guys. That was phenomenal. Yeah. You guys really do have just an incredible rapport dynamic. It's lovely. And I appreciate it because Byron, it makes me appreciate Byron too, because I know it does take a lot of energy and effort to put this stuff out there. And then just all the things you're mindful of with Roz, Dan, I think it's beautiful that you're making sure she has such a wonderful space to step into. So thanks for making all of that happen.
Great.
It's just great.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you for being vocal and telling me that these people needed space. Yeah.
Well, we need more white males like you. We just need to, we need to expand that. Replace the Andrew Tates of the world and multiply the Dans. That's what we need.
I'm gonna get that on a t-shirt. Less Andrew Tates, more Dans.
I love it. I would wear that.
More Dan.
100% wear that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm gonna
onlydans.com.
Only Dan. Yes.
Okay, that's maybe the best idea ever. I love this. Oh my god. You guys have an awesome weekend, and stay in touch. Hopefully we can chat again soon. And absolutely. Please come to Contact in the Desert, both of you.
Oh yeah.
Please.
I really want
it's worth it. I swear it's worth it. I promise. I promise. It's the best. So I'm gonna just keep nagging you guys until I see you have tickets. But
do.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, Kelly.
Bye-bye.
Okay. See you later, Dan. Bye.
You've been listening to an Audio Wool original, produced by Byron McCoy. Theme music is provided by Yawns. For more programs like this, visit audiowool.co.